Edo Shidane, She, Kansas Kristen Bigay, and Ashia. Ashchi Ashle do ho Sane Bashichi, Ahanzoy Ada Shiche, touching Ada Shanale. Hello, everybody. Welcome to, on behalf of Native Americans in Philanthropy, I'd like to welcome you to our August member education session. We are honored to have you here and join us today for this very important panel conversation. Together, as we focus on turning in this incredible work being done by Native nonprofits to uplift and empower our communities. We'll have the privilege of hearing from a distinguished group of leaders who are making significant impacts in various organizations. Their insights and experiences will provide us with valuable perspectives on challenges and opportunities facing Indigenous organizations as they are today. If you join us regularly, you'll notice something a little different today. Unfortunately, we will not have one of our regular junior moderators as part of the participation program of the Youth Grant Makers gathered in New York City this week. And they're all en route and returning home. Though they're not present, we'll be holding space for their needed perspective and hope that you and your organization will continue to join us in the efforts as it makes sense within your operations. Native nonprofits play a vital role in our communities by aiding in the equitable and accurate delivery of services. While they amplify the voices and perspectives of Indigenous peoples, they also face unique challenges in sustaining and scaling their operations. Research shows that less than 0.4% of large philanthropic funding makes its way to Indian country. This minuscule amount creates extreme competition among countless nonprofits with worthwhile missions. Native Americans in Philanthropy aims to change this. Native nonprofits must be prioritized in funding strategies and opportunities. In so many ways, I feel that they are the backbone for many of the communities that they serve. A lot of them have I say that a lot of nonprofit organizations, they operate with heart. So as within our culture and our traditions are all part of the planning of how they operate and what they do within their communities. So they will always hold a big piece of my heart in Native American organizations and nonprofits. To get us started today, I'd like to welcome NAP's Education Resource Facilitator, our MES moderator, Bobby Trey.
Hey, Kansas. Thank you so very much for joining, for giving that welcome, and for passing it over. We are very excited about the conversation today. Well, Bojo ni Khan, Bobby Trey Trousdale, Nadesh Nakas, Tecumseh, Oklahoma, Nadoch Bia. Hello, friends. My name is Bobby Trey Trousdale. I am from Tecumseh, Oklahoma, and I currently have the privilege of serving as Native Americans in Philanthropy's Education Resource Facilitator. We're so excited to have you joining us again for our MES sessions and are just very, very excited to dive into today's topic of funding opportunities for Native nonprofits. As Kansas mentioned, our junior moderators are traveling and won't be here today. We're holding space for them in our program, but we want to also lift them up for safe travels home and hope that their gathering and convening in New York City was absolutely phenomenal and helpful in their development. The conversation today won't be the same without them, but we do have a heavy conversation ahead. So let's dive just straight in. We've got a stellar panel. Charley, Shash, and Heather are all rock stars who are doing amazing things for Indian country. We've got more questions than usual. So I'm going to cut my welcome off here and dive just straight in. So y'all, as you're called, please introduce yourself and your affiliations however you feel comfortable. And in closing, I'm going to hit us with a question straight off. Can you share a little bit about your organization and how it supports Indigenous-led initiatives? So to get us started, I'd like to welcome them to the stage, Shash. Hey, Shash.
Hello, can you hear me?
We're good.
Yes. All right. Okay. Ja, ano to, shashajan shia, na shashan shlido, but that he bashisha, arasha, che twitchini, arashanele, no kadinet, diakona, auto, delba, auto, and she. My name is Shashaja, come from the Bear Clan, born by the Foldadarn people. And my grandfather, my paternal grandfather clan is Bitterwater, and my paternal grandfather clan is Mexican clan. And I am Diné, and I also identify as Dalba, which is one who comes in this world in a female body but holds masculine traits. And thank you for welcoming us here. I am with a group called Native Voices Rising. We are a grant maker group here in these Indian countries, and we've been around for 10 years. And I personally was a screener and reviewer, and also a consultant with Native Voices Rising. We are currently here in these parts in Indian country and have built a lot of amazing relationships. And we are also a partnership with Common Council Foundation and also with Native American and Philanthropy as well, NAP. So we have these two entities that are in partnership with us as we build our work in Native communities. Like I said, we've been around for 10 years, and we just have been continuing to give support to Native communities. And also just in the last, I would say this past year, we've given out 12.5 million general operation funds. And we have also components of a couple of areas, which are the supportive assistance, which we work with our grant partners. And then also we have this year the Funder Learning Fellowship, which is an amazing fellowship that works with foundations to really build an infrastructure to really learn and to build how to support Native communities. So I'm very fortunate to be here, and thank you all so much.
Absolutely. We're very, very excited to have you joining us today. And I just want to continue to lift up NVR and the team and the partnership with NAP. It is, I think, something that is very valuable to us here at Native Americans in Philanthropy. And so, and I know that we've had, I think, multiple speakers come from NVR. So we just continue to enjoy that working relationship and are in awe of the work that you all are doing. So. I also then, speaking of in awe of people that are working in the field, I want to bring on Heather Fleming. Heather, are you ready to join?
I am.
Awesome.
Thank you for having me. Yat Eshe Heather Fleming Inisha, but Alinishle do Bilagana Bashichin, Torchini Dashiche do Bilagana Dashanella. I am also Diné, and I am originally from Tuba City, Arizona, which is where I work now for an organization called Change Labs. We're a Native-led 501c3 that supports the entrepreneurship journey for Navajo and Hopi small businesses, everything from startup to ideally growing businesses and creating jobs and providing meaningful resources and products within our Native communities. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Kind of what I said to Shash, we're very excited, I think, to work with you in different fields and what we're doing in that here at NAP. And so very excited to present this here as part of our MES, the work that you all are doing, that entrepreneurial spirit that is, I think, embedded in our nonprofit. So finally, last but certainly not least, we'll be bringing on Charley Badheart Bull. Charley, are you here and ready to get started?
I am.
Let's do it.
Mitakuyepi, Yushkian Wachian Kapie. Dakota ia tukadakia maniwi mie washichu ia Carly Bad Harple makiapie. So in English, my name is Carly Bad Harple. In Dakota, my name is Tokadakia Maniwi, or woman who walks toward the future. Super honored to be here today as a NAT board representative, but also as executive director at Native Ways Federation, where our mission is to activate and expand informed giving in Indian country, really focused on supporting Native-led. And so this is an amazing group of people. These are the conversations we want to be a part of, and just happy to be here today. So thank you.
Of course, we're excited to have you. And everybody, if you find me tripping over my words, just know it's because I have a board member on the call now. So I've got to be careful, but no.
I'm terming out, so there's that.
But we thank you for your service here at NAP. Yes, we're very excited, I think, for the perspectives and the conversation that is to come. So let's just dive right in, I think, with our first question is, can each of you share your journey and experiences working within the Native nonprofit sector? And to get us started, Shash, I'll throw it back to you first, if that's okay.
Am I going to be the first round of everyone?
First round.
And I too should be nervous because Carly is also a board member of Common Council Foundation and has also served as an advisory council member
And
with
I love you.
Native Voices Rising. So it's just an honor again. Well, I was just sitting with this question and kind of pulling out some bullets. How I got involved with the nonprofit, Native nonprofit sector was when I was 19 years old. I went to a youth encampment, and at that youth encampment, I just really saw what was going on, like what's happening. This is all happening in my backyard, all the pollution, and living on the Diné reservation. You just keep going and going. No one talks about anything. And you just see the spring waters leaving. You see the cloud in the air, the dust and the smokes, and not really having conversations around the oil mining and all the different stuff that's happening to pollution. And so when I went to this organizing youth encampment, everything opened up for me. My eyes opened up, everything. And I think at that point, I realized, what am I going to do with my life? And I was brought to organizing by a gentleman called David. His name is David Lujan from the Donatsin Land Institute. And what they were doing and working on was land, water, and sovereignty issues. And so how he brought me in was to create a youth development training component. And I first said to him, I was like, I just graduated from high school. I don't know, I haven't gone to college. Don't even know how to go about this. He's like, everything I'm going to teach you is you're not going to learn that from college. So he brought me in, we jumped on board. And since then I've traveled many places, many communities. And one of the biggest things that we started working on was building the bridge between South and Central America. And working with a group called Peace and Dignity Journeys, which was bringing in the prophecies of the eagle and the condor. And as you will know me, I am from a traditional cultural background. My grandfather and my father's lineage are very connected to healers and practitioners and also leaders. And actually one of the descendants of also from my father's side of the family of Chief Manuelito. So I definitely have that in my blood. And I also had to realize that I had to also honor those aspects of who I am as practitioner of holding spaces. And as some of you may know, when we do our NVR meetings, when we do our CCF calls, we start with breath, because breath is very important. And when we breathe together, we are grounded and centered in that space. What we have done in this nonprofit world that we're in and I also got swept up in that mainstream nonprofit world, was keeping spirituality or culture or traditions to the side. And I have had to go against that grain and tell myself I can't do that anymore. And so I'll go back to working in South and Central America in the sense of building that bridge together and knowing that our sisters and brothers and us up here in Northern Continent, we're all one. We have that one connection and we have that beautiful way of being together. So that's how I got started, and got started with youth organizing, educational reform work, and going down to working in the LGBTQ TSI communities, and also, again, the healing justice component of the work that we do in this nonprofit world and this movement world. And so coming back to philanthropy, I did some work in philanthropy with some community-based foundations in Santa Fe, and also was asked to sit on different advisory committees, like with Robert W. Johnson Foundation. And also at this point in my life, realizing, what am I supposed to do right now? Because I've been out of the sector for about 25 years as a as a consultant, and doing work with organizations around health and wellness within those organizations, and really bridging the importance of bringing self to the center in the transformational work. And so I had to really sit with that, and I've been doing work with NVR for all these years, 8 years of a reviewer and a screener, and also working with Joy Purcell, who is running our supportive assistance component of the program of NVR, and as a community facilitator as well, Native facilitator that does work in the supportive assistance. And met with them, and they kept luring me to, hey, why don't you become a leader? I am a leader. What do you mean by NVR leader? And so in this last couple of years, we have grown to a place where we are now staffed, and so that's a big part of a big shift with NVR these last couple of years, is really building that infrastructure and creating staffing work for our work that we're doing. But yeah, so that I kind of went all over and started young, middle, did all these work in nonprofit sector and mainstream, and then I returned back to full circle. I used to be a staff member of Common Council Foundation back in the early 1990s, and which was only 2.5 staff people, and now it's like 27 staff people. And then I also did work, started organizing and working in the Native communities, and now I'm back in that role, 360, and being 52 years old, it just feels great to be my whole self, bring my whole self, my spiritual, my culture, and our breathing together and grounding. And I always have sage going here, so I'm able to also light sage and being remotely in our home. So so I'll stop at there, and it's just amazing to see that journey that we tend to take and come back to. And I'm just very fortunate to be in a position with NVR to be able to come back as holding that sacred space, which is about abundance and bringing abundance to the forefront, because our people have operated from abundance. Native people have always operated from abundance. And so the scarcity comes from that mind frame of fear and that mind frame of not having, but we do have. And so, yeah, I'll stop for now.
Yeah. Well, no, I almost feel like you could just keep going, please, because I think like that interweaving and I think there's so much beauty in like the diversity of the backgrounds that we bring to this work. And I know, at least for like our Native youth grant makers, it's really encouraging, I think, sometimes to see those different, like where your entry points are or the different roles that you've had, to say, oh, there's somebody like me, or there's somebody that's doing this work in a new way that's inspiring to them to keep them in the field. Keep that, I think recruitment and retention is so important. And so, no, thank you for sharing that and for going through that whole journey it's a life well lived, is what it sounds like. So, Heather, I'll pass it over to you. And just a reminder, the question is, can you share your journey and experiences working within or around the Native nonprofit sector?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of the co-founders of Change Labs, and I've been the executive director now. This is year 5. Change Labs is only 5 years old. And I came here from another nonprofit that I used to run, but I think I am still acclimating, getting used to being an employer on the reservation. So let me back up and do my journey. I'll keep it brief, but my career started in Silicon Valley, and I was working in product design and innovation for about 6 years before starting my own business or nonprofit. And I worked, my role back then was to develop culturally appropriate, affordable products and services in disadvantaged communities. And we worked with organizations, usually social ventures and social entrepreneurs in Kenya, all around East Africa and India, some parts of South America, mostly internationally. And the thing that struck me about that work is I would work with some of the most amazing startups and small business owners that had a lot of the same constraints that we have back home on the reservation, albeit like lack of basic infrastructure, like clean water or even electricity, but also the human resources challenge that we have on reservations, limited access to financing, business infrastructure. But the thing that struck me about these organizations that I was working with was that they were making it work. Like they had some of the toughest environments to start and grow their business ideas, and they were making it work. And they were working on things that like making residential solar affordable through novel combining technology and novel financing mechanisms, or reducing smoke inhalation from three-stone fires, or making credit more accessible to subsistence farmers. All of these really cool ideas and models that I was thinking all the time, gosh, I wish we had stuff like this on the reservation. And I met my co-founder, her name is Jessica Stego, back in 2013. And a friend introduced us who knew the work that I was doing and knew what she was doing and thought we should talk. She was at that time going around and teaching business classes around the Navajo chapters. And she was an entrepreneur, and she wanted to help other entrepreneurs start up around the Navajo Nation in an effort to diversify our economy and kind of promote community wealth generation. I love what she was doing, and I was telling her about everything that's going on internationally, and wouldn't it be cool if some of this was going on back home? And she and I had such contrasting experiences where she had spent her entire career working with entrepreneurs on the reservation. I had spent my entire career working with entrepreneurs, not on the reservation, but in a very similar context. So she and I more or less brought our work together and created Change Labs. It was kind of born out of these ideas of cross-pollination, technology, innovation, business, change, social entrepreneurship. And the stark transition for me was going from like San Francisco to Window Rock. And it's been such a journey for me to have that experience of starting something off the reservation in an urban area versus starting something on the reservation, and all the challenges that come with that. Maybe I'll leave that for later, because that's kind of what we're here to talk about, is why it is so challenging, why we don't see as many Native nonprofits as we should, particularly those on reservations. I feel like I've lived that experience in the past 5 years, and it was, even though I know it's hard, it was still a surprise for me, and it continues to be a surprise for me every single day.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad we're leaving it there, but I'm kind of not, because I just want to like get to the heart of it, like, because that is why we're here to have that conversation. But thank you for giving, I think, voice to that, and that like reality of scaling. I don't know if that's the right word that we would use, but shifting those operations. It's a very different way of doing it, but we'll dive in. I digress. We'll dive in. So Charley, I'll throw it over to you. Why do you think it's crucial to establish not the right question. Share your journey and experiences working within the Native nonprofit sector, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So for one, I feel like we need to have a part 2 of this conversation, because I'm just so inspired from stuff that's been shared from other folks. So my background with the nonprofit world is I grew up in it. My dad was executive director at Phoenix Indian Center, Lincoln, Nebraska Indian Center. I grew up playing under boardroom tables with those yellow, those notepads. Like they would give us those and we would play meeting while my parents were having meetings and trying to change the world. So that's where I come from. And it's inspired me in so many ways. And just another piece to share that I haven't shared a lot, so I'm going to put it out there. So my name is Charley Eastman Bad Harpole. My husband's a Bad Harpole from Pine Ridge. My middle name is Eastman because my grandfather was Charles Eastman Ohiesa. And he was part of founding one of the first Native nonprofits in the country. He was part of, going to DC and advocate for Native folks. And so I grew up learning about him and how he was trying to advocate and understand these systems. And that's where I got really involved with wanting to be a systems thinker and understand what are all the systems that we're working within? What are trying to get a sense of both where we're at as far as Native nonprofits and trying to exist within these systems, but also how can we change them? Because we know they're not working for us, and we know that our people are super creative, and we come from artists and all these amazing thinkers, just brilliant people. And so trying to think about how can we try to figure out how to, whether it's working, making the systems work for us, or figuring out we need something different. And so that's kind of been my approach in this world, I guess. But when I came on board to Native Ways Federation, I was asked to come on board in part because I worked in philanthropy. I worked at the Bush Foundation for 6 years. So I had kind of navigated the philanthropy system. Again, it's one foundation. And as we all know, foundations are all they all do their own thing. But I started to get a sense of how philanthropy was working. But then the other piece was, before I worked at Bush, is I worked in the legal world. So I'm a trained attorney. I worked in child welfare, and I got a sense of that system, the child welfare system, and how it wasn't working for our people, and how there's super cool things that are happening in the world of Native nonprofits. People are super creative. We're finding ways. We have the solutions. We know what needs to happen. But we're not getting the resources. We're not getting the support that we need. And so that's where my kind of career shift into from, philanthropy to now running a Native nonprofit, where now my focus is on supporting Native-led organizations, because I know that we have the answers, and we need the funding. We need to better understand the funding cycles, because the world out there around how folks get funded, we're left out of the picture. And so we need to be we need to be in those conversations. We need folks understanding how to best support us.
Yeah, absolutely. Carly, you kind of led pretty perfectly into the next question, and I'll start with you. Is we have the answers, we need the funding, but why do you think it is so crucial to establish and adequately resource Native nonprofits in order to support Indigenous communities effectively?
The work that our people are doing is going to save the world. Honestly, it is. Like the work our people is doing comes back to just being good human beings. And that's what, we need that to get funded. And there's so many good examples in Indian country of that happening. And yet we are so underfunded. And it's despicable because folks just don't think about us. They don't know about us. We're the other category when it comes to data. Reclaiming Native Truth, amazing research. I know they just had an updated piece that came out. This stuff needs to be, it needs to get more attention. Indian country needs to get more attention, in large part, I think, because the work we're trying to do is actually going to create a better world, not just for our people, but for all of our people, for all of our kids. And that's what I think about. I have a 7-year-old kid, right? And I think about, like, what's the world I want him to live in? And when I think about the cool stuff that's happening in Indian country, we know what to do. We just haven't quite had the support. We don't quite have the infrastructure to make it happen. And if we can do that, I honestly think we can change the world. So
you got me fired up. Now let's do it, right? Well, Heather, I want to throw it to you and ask the same question of why do you think it is crucial to establish and adequately resource Native nonprofits?
If I think about the role that nonprofits play in communities on the whole, they fill unmet needs. They strengthen communities. They create jobs. They're advocacy and policy change makers. And I think those are the things that we need the most in our Native communities. So I think so Change Labs exist to support small businesses, and they have the same challenge as nonprofits. So I often just rely on that. But if anybody's driven across the reservation, either on your way to Monument Valley or Grand Canyon, I'm not sure who's tuning in, but you may wonder, like, why are there no businesses here? You'll see the KFCs and the Taco Bells, and the gas stations, but you won't really see any mom and pop businesses, any small businesses, anything that is owned by a Native person that is culturally cognizant. And the other thing that you may notice too, I always tell people to do this. If you pull up Tuba City on Google Maps, and then you pull up Cortez, Colorado on Google Maps, a big res town and then a nearby border town, same population. And if you just look at them from the like the satellite view, you will visibly see what a community of the exact same population in the same part of the US, what growth looks like on one that is off the reservation, versus what growth looks like for one that is on the reservation. And to me, that is like the greatest visualization of the sheer amount of unmet need that we have in our communities. There's no stores, there's no banks, there's no grocery stores, there's no gas stations. And who is filling those gaps? I feel like nonprofits are a way to address some of these, the stark amount of needs and the job creation that we desperately need in our communities. But yes, they don't exist and they're woefully unfunded. And part of that is because any business or nonprofit that started on reservation land plays by a completely different set of rules than a nonprofit or a business that is off the reservation in a border town or in the urban area. And I think that needs to be addressed. That needs to be made visible. And funders need to understand that distinction. We don't not create things because we don't want to, or because we don't have the talent or the motivation. It's because we don't play by the same rules, and our funders need to know that.
Oh, absolutely. Even hearing you just say that reminds me, last month for our July MES, it was focused on economic development. And something that I think kept coming up was that idea that there's so much to do and it is a completely different rule book, but it's also different stakes entirely because it's all interconnected and it's all, it's something like that community development. You can't have a conversation about nonprofits without thinking about economic development, without thinking about education, without thinking about like our elder and community care. And so it's just, I don't know. Yeah, very powerful. And I have not had the opportunity to look at those two side by side. So I know what I'm doing as soon as we get off this call though. So Shash, I want to toss it now over to you and NVR. You guys, I think, are doing it. You're getting dollars into Indian country. Was it 12.5 million you said last year alone? Why is it crucial to establish and adequately resource Native nonprofits?
So since 2013 to last year, it's been to 12.5 million. So we started off very low in 2013. And I think with the vision of what the two founders of Native Voices Rising has really impacted the work that NVR has done in the fields of philanthropy. So much so. Carly Hare, who was the director at that point in 2013 with NAP, and then Ron Rowell, who was the director of CCF, coming together to build NVR with that understanding that the funding source isn't there for Native nonprofits, right? And so there's so many things I want to step on with this question. First of all, yes, building off of what Carly said, just that understanding that we are here and we will always be here as Native people. We have never left. Our value systems, our way of natural law and order connecting to the environment has been crucial to the point of us being resources of bringing balance into this world that we live in. And it's up to our place of how we take that place, right? It's up to us how we take that place. Do we wait to be invited to be at the table? Or do we just come in and we hold that space and say, we're here from the community and we're here to also hold space because all these different issues in our community matter, right? We are part of this community. So it's kind of like owning that leadership role and taking that responsibility as well and not wait to be brought in. Because I'm telling you, if we wait to be brought in, they don't know how to do that. They don't understand how to build relationship with us Native communities. I always tell folks, what's the issue here? What's the problem? Go talk to the Native communities. Go sit with them. Have conversation. Oh, I don't know how. It's like, okay, there's fear there. Understandable. I don't know why. Maybe because, we're very, amazing and they just can't understand how we are to hold space with them. So that's the first thing that I see is that not understanding who we are as a community and how we can sit down together and bust that challenge of building relationship with each other. That's the most important key. And that's what NVR is. We build relationships with our grant partners from top to bottom, all the way circle. We believe in a circular format. We don't believe in this hierarchical way, this linear way of being, because that doesn't work. That hasn't worked in nonprofit sectors. And we have to be transparent to our constituents, who are the Native communities that we give grants to, right? Who are grant partners. They believe in a system that is about not leaving anybody out. No whatsoever. We are taught that children, babies, infants, children, teenagers, adults, elders, they all work together. We live in a system now where it's like compartmentalized. You have the women's movement here, you have the youth movement here, you have the education, reform, all these movements that are so separate from one another. But in our community, it's all one together. And a lot of these applications, when they come to us and they ask us what should we focus on, we say focus on everything. We're not here to dictate and tell you what to focus on. As a philanthropy, we should be able to build relationships and hear what is happening, and what we can do as philanthropists, as grant partners, is trust that community, that we know that they know where the money needs to go. That's why NVR has operated from giving general operations. None whatsoever about program or project oriented. General operations. And we've talked with these partners in a way where it's amazing work that they're doing, from language, language, and all the way from childhood, all the way to healing from addiction, right? We have people that are doing that work. We also are dealing with folks that are dealing with how do we deal with our trauma, right? This historical trauma, so that we can move forward. So there's so many pieces. And one of the groups that I want to highlight that has been doing this work, and I'm a founder of, is the Native Organizers Alliance, NOAA. They have built an organizational structure to work with Native organizers to do this work in the nonprofits in their communities. And they are also one of those folks that have been part of NVR from the beginning, from when we funded, and they are also one of our multi-year grant partners as well. So there's just so many pieces that I'm just like wanting to touch upon, but the basic things that I do see is the importance of philanthropy folks to understand that we are not scary people, that we can sit at the table with you, we can have these conversations. It's okay to not know. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to build a relationship. And also, as Native folks in our community, that's the first and foremost, is building that trusting relationships, because we have also been dealt with the underhanded levels of things that have been not just transparent to us. And so there's that underlined of that DNA that needs to be healed, And so the work that we're doing in every part, NVR is definitely in the forefront and is able to work with grant partners around getting the support that they need, directly the support that they need as organizations and what they need. And then also, one of the biggest things that I do sit with when we are asked to, why wasn't, we want to have more conversations about how we can get, how we can apply. The first and foremost we do is we sit with them first. We take breaths with them. You should see these grant partners, these organizations, like, what do you mean take breaths? Let's take 3 breaths together before we move forward. And imagine that we're sitting in a circle around a fire and talking story with one another. And this is what my grandfather taught me in using the Zoom thing here before he crossed over. Oh, you guys sit around the fire talking about all these different things that need to happen in our communities. And I was like, what do you mean, Grandpa? He goes, the fire wire that connects all of you all to talk, to heal and do the work for a community. And I was just like, this elder is utilizing and understanding the knowledge of what this source is, of how we come together and talk in these Zoom sessions, these conversations. And I always bring it back to the community as we're sitting around the fire talking. And once we say that to them, they're just like, okay, I can have this conversation with you. And I always make also my communication very personal. I always start off with Yázhí relatives in an email. Ahyehe, bringing our native language in. Because that also warms the heart of our people to start to take that stance to own those conversations that need to happen with non-native folks. I'll stop there.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And I feel like in that answer, we got kind of like into the next one. So panelists, if you guys will allow me, I'm going to collapse a couple of these questions into one another and say, like, we know that like that misconception or that lack of understanding, but truly, I think at the bedrock, a lack of trust results in the 0.4% of funding from large philanthropic dollars making their way to Indian country. And so I think that kind of addresses like the why of it. But what other challenges have you all identified that are unique to Native nonprofits when seeking funding, or to entrepreneurs seeking that financing, Heather? And I'll pitch that to you actually first. What challenges are unique?
It's a good question. I think, to your point, a lot of it has been touched on. What I was scribbling down in my notes was, I've never been on the philanthropy side. I've always been on the other side. So I don't want to make too many assumptions. But here's what I know. I know that of the 80-something donors that we have at Change Labs, only 3% of them have ever visited us on the reservation. I know that the majority of them were the first Native-led nonprofit that they've ever worked with. And I also know that we had to do quite a bit of work to even, like educate them on the context of the challenge that we're trying to address. So I think that plays into it. Visibility, of course, is another huge issue. Visibility on both sides. We get the few nonprofits that we work with at Change Labs, almost all of them come to us and say, like, I don't know where to find grants. How do I find funders? How do I build relationships? I don't want to say that every nonprofit that starts has that at their fingertips, but I do think when you're in an urban area, or even your broadband is reliable, or you went to college and so-and-so who does this or that, you have an existing network, that you do have a little bit of a leg up. And a lot of those things we just don't have. And then similarly, I imagine that if you're in philanthropy, and I'm imagining not a Native philanthropist, but just like a traditional philanthropist, the person's probably been to college. They probably grew up in a typical American town or context. I don't really know. But then you look on the reservation, the Navajo Nation, our economist just recently released her SEDS report for 2024, and it shows like only 5% of people on the reservation have gone to college. So, and I'm sure, a lot of people are growing up in a context that's completely different than the American experience. So there's also just this disconnect between who has the money and is making those decisions and the people that are trying to apply for those funding. I have to think just on, psychology or behavioral economics, that we probably do fund people that we are most like us. And I feel like if that is true, then Native people are automatically at a disadvantage for the demographics, but also because we are fundamentally separate in our land and the way that our government works, our culture, tradition. So unfortunately, because we have to play in a non-Native philanthropic context, I think that does make it a little bit harder. And then the other one that comes to mind is just the capacity. I feel people ask me all the time, what is the number one challenge you guys have at Change Labs? Because the problem we're trying to tackle is so complex, like building an economy on the reservation, diversifying the economy, filling all the insane market gaps, building wealth within communities, within families. It's almost an impossible task. But our biggest challenge is human capacity. It's the fact that I'm the executive director and I have to live in Denver because that's just the way the world works now. I'm one of those people who listen to my tribe. I left to get an education because that's what they told us to do. They even gave me money to do that. But then when I was ready to come home, there was no place for me. Can't get a job here. You can't get land for a home. Stand in line for the home site lease process. So I feel like I'm a representative of some of the community that we're trying to train at Change Labs, but the system is designed to get us off the reservation, and then once we're off, we're stuck there. So how do we then bring that capacity and that knowledge and those skills back home to the reservation where it's most needed? And until we fill that gap, I think that this is going to consistently be a problem.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, what a powerful answer. No, and I really appreciate, and if I may quote Kamala, we exist in the context of all of which has come before. And I think like nowhere is that truer than in Indian country. And we have to have that, I think, understanding and acknowledgement going into things. So I appreciate you giving a voice and space for that here. And I think to really provide even more context to the question, Shash, before I hand it over to you, is we know that 0.4% of funding is a false number anyway. It's double counted because in the collection of that research, it was, I think, foundation dollars going into community were counted twice, and they were given to Native nonprofits, and then those dollars went out the door on the back end. And so it's even smaller than that. And so that provides a little bit of context of where that comes from in our research with Candid studies even after that. So Shash, what are some other challenges that are unique to Native nonprofits with even that smaller depleted number?
I think definitely highlighting a lot of things that Heather said, right? Is I just want to piggyback on is also just mainstream, not philanthropy work that's happening in this country. A lot of it I feel like is dealt with how do I say this? Ideas at that moment in time of funding, when these funders get so excited about a certain thing, then they fund, and then they deplete that, right? And I think that we've seen it within our communities as well, around just like land back, around just like the Standing Rock, around missing and murdered Indigenous women, all these different components that brought to a higher level, and there was a lot of funding happening, but then now it's kind of dispersed and leaving a lot of groups or organizations that have been affiliated with this to like, okay, now where do we get these fundings from to continue the work that we're doing, right? And so I feel like that has, some of the things that we've heard is the challenge of that. And then also the challenge of also really looking at multi-year grants, right? And creating those spaces and moments within these organizations to receive multi-year grants and high grants, right? Process. And those pieces are very important that we've been hearing. And I do feel like, again, it comes back to just understanding how to take moments to work with Native communities, right? And we're dealing with that within even our own how we're getting funding from other partners and philanthropy partners within our system of NVR so that we can continue to do this grant making. We're constantly having to educate. We're constantly having to sit at the table. We're constantly having to create those spaces. Even within our partners, how do we build those relationships and really understanding what Native organizing and activism is about, right? We are having to be those ones that are having those conversations. And granted, everybody is not going to fully quite understand it because they can't walk in our footsteps. They can't be that every single day. But there's a point where I feel like we just have to continue to just push and advocate. And if we're going to be that middle, that intermediary, as folks that are able to get into those doors, folks that are able to build with those community folks, then we can be that pillar, you know. One of the things that we have established this past year with Dr. Arviso, who also is working with us, who is actually, you know, an amazing support in the work that we've been doing from philanthropy work. I think you all had her as a guest, I think last month or a couple months ago, and just her expertise, and just so honored to be working with her side by side with NVR. Just her expertise of how she's seen and how she has walked that path of philanthropy, right? Also, Joy Purcell as well. You know, these are two leaders that have held those roles in philanthropy, and as building on these ways of how do we do this work and how do we build those relationships with Dr. Arviso really holding on and working with the Funder Learning Fellowship, right, as a cohort, working with these folks that are able to come to the table and have conversations. And in this cohort, really bringing in the expertise and understandings of what Native folks are doing, Native folks, organizers and activists, bringing those capacity, having these cohorts be of training and giving the resources that they need, in the sense of asking how do they bring more money to Native communities. And just in this past year, with this cohort that was brought together, we have had about 2 of the groups are now looking to give funding to the Native communities. And I think, to me, those components are very important. And those are pieces that we need to continue to build on, continue to keep moving. And again, it's us just really making ourselves and our way to the table and creating those spaces for nonprofit folks, Native nonprofit folks led, to be at those tables as well. You know, where are these fundings? You know, who are funding? How are we funding? You know, we get asked by different regional foundations to be able to give them the resources of who are Native folks in those communities that we can reach out to. So these are steps that are happening, but in a way we have to really build it, of how do we do this in a collective way, right? How do we build this more from a collective approach?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Charley, speaking to that collective approach, I know like that is it seems to be some of the work from the outside looking in that you guys are focusing on. And I think building that platform and that space for that cross co-production, so to speak. But what challenges are unique to Native nonprofits when seeking funding?
Holy cow. I have so much I want to say right now.
Yeah.
Just responding to Heather and Shash.
Yeah.
And thinking about like the opportunity when it comes to, for example, Native intermediaries. Like that's a space where foundations are looking to, it's a challenge because on the one hand, you want foundations to have direct relationships with Native nonprofits. And on the other hand, we also recognize that we have very few Native people working in foundations. And so if they don't have those relations, like if we want to talk about trust-based philanthropy and, you know, these are all like great things to think about. And if we don't have people who have those relationships, it's really hard. And so they are looking more and more to intermediaries. And I think that's a huge, it's a huge opportunity. It's a huge space, and we don't have many. So we have very few. And when you look at MVR, and that's one of the reasons, like the work they're doing is so incredible. And so that's just one thing I want to put out there as a challenge. In particular, when we think about, trying to think about how deep to go here, but with like thinking about how to, like, our goal is to get multi-million dollars, you know, investments into Indian country, right? We need organizations that can take on those kinds of investments. And when you look at things like the public support test and issues with that with Native nonprofits. Like folks don't really, I don't know that we're having those conversations or figuring out like what's the policy work that needs to happen around that. And so just want to put that out there, because if we want Native nonprofits to be able to take on multi-million-dollar investments, which we do, if we want them to be seen, whether it's an intermediary or something else, like however you want to define it, how are we creating organizations that can take in that kind of funding? Because right now there's not that many that can. I mean, we can all name probably on one hand the ones who can take in this MacArthur $100 million or whatever it is investment. We're trying to work together and figure it out, which is great. And how do we get to that place of being able to do that? And so that's one of the things I wanted to put out. The other things is as we were talking, I can't remember, it was either Heather or Shash was talking about Native leadership. We need to recognize that we are all leaders. So when I got into philanthropy, I came in through a fellowship program. I was a working attorney. I had my own caseloads. Like I'd gone to college, like I did my stuff. And at the same time, I basically came into philanthropy as an intern. And was treated as such in many ways. And why is that? Why is it that our people are not treated as experts in the field in this space of philanthropy? Because we are. And so how do we collectively, I think, advocate together for that and help folks understand? And a couple of things I want to put out there. I know we're low on time, but Native Ways Federation, got to put out some plugs. We've got some amazing campaigns. Our Give Native campaign, which is part of our Giving Tuesday partnership. And then we also have a Giving Days program in May. And so I just want folks to like take a look at our website, take a look at our social media, understand like the what we're trying to do when it comes to our focus is on collective advocacy, on like we are stronger together as Native nonprofits and how we can come together. And so I just want to put that out there, and I hope that people will reach out and try to get more information.
No, absolutely. And Carly, I'm so glad you have said that, because I think like while this question is rooted in the challenges, Native Ways Federation is leading a solution or like helping in that space. And we don't have to stay, I think, in that idea of what is just the problem. We're also developing our own solutions within Indian country. And so I'm glad you're lifting up your organization, but I want to just echo that and say, like, look to, I think, your all's resources, your all's initiatives for hope and for a path forward. So thank you for doing that. If you'll allow me, I actually want to break this down in the next couple of questions down in a different kind of way. We are having some amazing, I think, resourcing and conversation happening in our online audience. And so there's a couple of questions I want to go through and just be sure that we do highlight, but I'm going to direct them to each of you if that's okay. So you might not have the same question, but we'll just keep going in that way. So Shash, I'm going to start with you on this one. Is in, I think, NVR's review of working with and funding Native nonprofits, can you share effective storytelling and strategies to secure sustainable funding? And that comes from Cassandra on our YouTube page. It's two different questions, but I'm going to collapse them into one. So really focusing on storytelling methods and strategies to secure that funding.
Yes, so it's very important. I really want to address that with NVR. We really we highlight storytelling to the utmost. One of the things that when we sit with organizations and they're inquiring, some of the pieces of why they didn't get funded the last round, we sit with them, we give them conversations, we have those conversations, and we specifically tell them, do the storytelling. Don't do this application like you know, this strategy or this percentage, you know, we know what the problem is. We need to know the stories of how, you know, you're going to be making these efforts and doing these movements happening in your community. So storytelling is a big part of our piece of what we do with NVR and how we sit with organizations who are applying. One of our reviewers this past orientation we had with our reviewers, and to note also all the decisions that are made for grants are done by community reviewers, are gone through screener reviewers who are community. We have folks at the philanthropy level, Native folks. We have folks that are on the ground organizing. We have folks that are leaders in, you know, different aspects of Native communities. So it's all Native led, and the decision is all Native. And I also want to highlight too that the youth grant makers of NAP are also reviewers as well. So we have those youth component within our grant making process as well. So one of the participants, he mentioned that we should really look at how we do this application in a sense of video storytelling, right? And I think that's something that is important, is that face-to-face, that conversation, and that this piece is very important when we do that. And so that's another piece that that I kind of would love for us to look into and see what that looks like. And what was the next part of that? I'm sorry.
It was a mixture of that storytelling and then other strategies to implement secure sustainable funding.
I think the important thing of securing stable funding is the continuing of reassertifying yourself, right? And continuing to have those conversations. We're still here. What are some of the ways that we can get funding? What are other opportunities that we can do to get funding, so that they still understand that it's not just like a one-time funding, that you're constantly asking those questions. We welcome those questions, but I also want to encourage folks that are holding these nonprofit sectors to be able to ask those questions. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to sit with folks to be able to see what are other opportunities, you know, and not wait for those opportunities to come to you, but seek those opportunities within the grants that you are receiving as well. Because by all means, there's different components within those grants. There's either collaboration, there's either networking, there's different forms of areas that a lot of these funders also fund. And I think that it's also important for us to seek those and to strategize around what that's going to look like. And then I think collectively within your region, who are there? Who are the Native folks in those areas that are actually also asking for funding? And how can you maybe come together to build that work together? You know, because if we continue to build this way of siloing and, you know, oh, that's that res over on the other side. Oh, that's that res on that side. I mean, that's the whole thing of divide and conquer, right? That continues to build. So why don't we build it from a different place? Like Charley said, we can do it differently. And I think we also have to challenge ourselves as Native folks to do it differently, to seek different forms of ways of making things, you know, manifest, right? Like I said, we are very abundant. We have the capacity to do this. The finances there. We just have to pull our sources together and work together to make that happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Charley, I'm coming to you next. But if you want to add on,
I have so many things I want to say. Can I?
I know.
I love all of that, Josh. Thank you. I feel like we're so much on the same page as far as our people. We have the power to do this. And at the same time, I've been a part of so many like family foundations, or because I work in the philanthropy world, where they bring us together. They bring a few Native folks together and they're like, okay, create a grant program. And folks are like, what they think to do is what they know, quite frankly, which is like, they're not even thinking about general operating. They're not even thinking about like what could be. And that's where we as Native people need to come together and have these conversations and be demanding these things and saying, these are the things that we want, and have a collective understanding of what's possible. Because in the world of philanthropy, there's a lot that's possible. I mean, it was created basically to house people's money. There's a lot that we can do there, and there's huge opportunity. So I just want to, emphasize that. The other piece is something that was brought up around capacity building. So foundations have so many programs around capacity building, but they create the definitions around, this is what capacity building looks like for Native nonprofits. So I just want to lift up, we have a report on our terms supporting a Native nonprofit sector. Dana Arviso, Joy Persall, a number of amazing folks were part of coming together for these conversations. So we're going to be doing some more promoting on that report. And I just encourage folks to take a look at it, because we're hoping that it will be like the beginning of more conversations, especially for folks within Indian country, of like, how do we talk about capacity building? Because we know that term even is not quite right. But what's the world we want to live in? How do we collectively dream together? And so this report was part of like starting that conversation. It's not all the way there yet. We have some amazing themes that came up, but hopeful that folks will take a look at it and be excited to learn more. The other thing that I have in my notes here as I was listening to folks talk was around the importance of diverse revenue streams. So that's one of those things where it's like, it's so frustrating, right? Because we rely on foundations. We try to do some trainings here and there. And it's a struggle within our organizations. I think one of the things, so Native Ways Federation was founded by these amazing national Native nonprofits from across the country. American Indian College Fund, First Nations Development Institute, Association on American Indian Affairs. These are folks, ACES, like these are folks who have been doing this work for a long time. And we're still trying to figure out, in many ways, the individual funding world. We know that when it comes to funding for nonprofits, when you look at the data, the majority of funding does not come from foundations. It comes from individual funders. And so again, I brought this up before, but like, how do we access that? How are we educating folks? How are we making those connections for Indian country so they can access, especially as we think about some of the younger folks who are now coming into wealth. I mean, we've got this there's a lot of stuff happening politically right now. And folks who are like maybe coming into wealth and have a social justice kind of like inclination. How are we accessing them and some of that funding? Those are conversations that we need to be having together and figuring out. So.
Absolutely. Thank you. Heather, I want to make my way over to you with a question actually coming from the Dipping Spoon Foundation. And I'm going to alter it just a little, so hopefully it feels more in the context of where we are in the conversation. But I think as somebody that started an organization that has had to have that that entrepreneurial spirit of understanding like the value of a mentor and community and having those people around you, what fellowships would you recommend for change makers? Or it's a two-part question, that what will make executing our personal mission sustainable? From your own experience, what's made it work?
I have never done a fellowship program, so that may not be a good question for me. And I don't see them that often. I saw somebody recommended one in the chat. I never had resources like that. So is there another way you want me to answer the question? I don't, or maybe
No, that's totally, we can move along. If either of the other two would like to chime in, Or Heather, I've got another one that I can give.
I'll jump
Go
in
ahead.
if that's okay with Native Governance Center and the Native Nations Rebuilders Program. They are, their work is heavily focused on tribal government, but their fellowship recipients end up working across the board, including with nonprofits, and they've done incredible work. So I just want to put the flag out there for Native Governance Center and the Rebuilders Program.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And we'll try and find the link for that and get that at least submitted or shared out to this group that's viewing it. But Heather, I want to come back to the earlier you were talking about, I think, some of the challenges specifically with even your own personal life, having to stay in Denver. So I want to hop to a question about like, what can Native nonprofits or Indigenous organizations do to recruit and retain talented community members?
I was hoping I wouldn't have to answer this question because it's like I already shared, it's our number one struggle. So I'm still looking for solutions. Oh gosh. And I would say that the answer is probably different if you're on the reservation versus off. My experience is very limited to on the reservation. And frankly, I don't feel like I have a ton of insight other than we're trying to offer meaningful work. We're trying to offer competitive salaries, which I have to say is really weird on the reservation because there's lots of studies on border towns, but none on the reservation. If you do like salary surveys, there's nothing on the reservation. So competitive is like competitive to what? To what McDonald's advertises. There's not a lot of salary data out there for reservation jobs, but also the flexibility in the sense of like most of our staff have to drive in from 2 or 3, 4 hours to come in, and kind of accounting for that in the way that you work is a lot of the people that you'll want on your team will have to come from really far away. Somebody wrote in the chat something about like, I have to find it. But budget differences for on-reservation Native nonprofits versus off-reservation Native nonprofits. And they were saying like, is it okay that our travel budget is higher? And I feel that 100% in my heart because our travel budgets are insane because people are driving all over the place. Navajo is just so big. And then we often have to go off the reservation for various to host various events and whatnot, just because we don't have enough hotels on the reservation or there's no restaurants to host, such and such activities. So we all have to drive into a border town. So having like a meeting for our members, the travel costs alone are astronomical. That's not what you're asking though. I just wanted to like cheer for that person who wrote that in the comments, that it's something that we have to be very mindful of. So flexibility, meaningful work, competitive wages. And I think another type of flexibility, I don't know how to name it, because it is a contrast to my experience running a nonprofit, both in California and Colorado before coming to Change Labs. And that's that when you're in the community, pretty much every worker who's awesome is doing 10 billion other things at the same time. So a great example is my colleague, Marcia. She's our CFO, more or less. She's also the vice president of her chapter, and she's running for president of her chapter. And I hope one day she runs for president of the Navajo Nation. But I know she's doing that in addition to her work at Change Labs. And because she's so active in her community, she's doing all these other things. And instead of like trying to fight that, it's more like, well, that's part of who we are at Change Labs. Everybody here not only works here, but they do a million other things with their family, with their community, with their whatever board they sit on or leadership role that they have elsewhere on the Navajo Nation, like accounting for that and almost like embracing it and building it into your model in some way, shape, or form. Those are the things I can come up with.
Heather, can I just thank you for that? Because I think that's huge. And it's something that we don't talk about enough, that like in Indian country, our priorities are, we're accountable to a lot of people. And the fact that I now work for a Native nonprofit, but previously I worked in philanthropy, and I worked in local government for Hennepin County. And they don't make space for that. Like, they basically tell you can't do these things, or if you do, like, it's not accounted for in different ways. And it's pretty freaking terrible. And so I just want to say thank you for raising that, because I think that's something that, again, as we talk about as Native nonprofits, how we can do things differently, it's recognizing that accountability and that we have these responsibilities to our communities, and that's okay. And not only is that okay, but it probably makes us do our jobs better. And can we talk about that?
Actually, yes, because I want to use that as the jumping off point for the next question. Is like, it is, I think, so important to not only acknowledge that, but another thing that I think Native nonprofits have to do is we have to ensure that we're being good ancestors for those, of course, that have come behind us, but those that are also to come. And a key part of that in our work here at NAP, how we've activated that, is the use of our Native youth grant makers, the making space for them, ensuring that they're a part of this philanthropic sphere, so that it's, while they go on to continue to do these amazing, amazing things, we want this sector to be a part of their journey going forward. And so, if you don't mind, I'd love to, before we kind of hit the final question of what advice do you have for the next generation? What advice for future practitioners or young leaders that may want to be pursuing careers in Native nonprofits? What would you tell them? And I'll start with Charley.
Oh gosh. I would tell them that a lot more than I do. Honestly, when I have a 7-year-old kid, his creativity, like his view of the world, blows my mind. And so I know it's hard. Like, I know I'm trying to raise him and cultivate a world of accountability and work ethic and all the things. And I don't want him to lose that. I don't want him to lose that creativity. And so I think that would, I don't know if I'm answering the question exactly, but it's trying to figure out how to harness, like, our young people, they got so many cool ideas. And so how do we harness that in a productive way that can work with our organizations and that we can learn from?
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Heather, I'll come to you next with that one. What advice for future Native nonprofit leaders, or those that may want to pursue it?
This is the other one I was like, oh, I hope they don't ask me that one. I'm gonna steal from others. One of my first employers told me a while ago, like, to always run head first at your problems, and that has served me really well. Starting a nonprofit or trying to get anything new, make change, you're going to run into a lot of problems. And if your tendency is to shy away from those, or to put those on the back burner, or just avoid them in general, that won't serve you well. So, like, getting comfortable running at those problems and tackling them head on. And the second one I'm going to steal, if any of you watch The Bear on FX, the new season just came out, and the character Chef Terry says at the very end, she's giving advice to the main character, and she says, I just love it so much. You have no idea what you're doing, and therefore you're invincible. That's, I would say, like, just make that your mantra and go forward, because if you know too much and you get weighed down by all the challenges, you'll freeze and you'll paralyze. But something about not knowing is almost better. So you're invincible at this moment. Charge ahead.
Absolutely. What a call to action for them. Keep going. Charge ahead. All right, Shash, what advice would you have?
One of the things that I hold dear to my heart is a quote called, it's basically saying, "You are your ancestors' wildest dreams." And so being in that place as a young adult, right, and holding that forum, sometimes you see the struggle, sometimes you see what's happening, but for you to be able to stay in your grounding and center of who you are as a Native young person and having your aspects of your language, your aspects of your knowledge, your values of your systems that have been integrated or that you have been around in your community is so powerful, and you can bring your whole self to any part of aspect of where you want to be at, and know that that is the authentic way of being, of who you are and how you come. And also, one of the things I just want to say real quickly, my wife and I were so amazed with the youth grant makers, when we had a moment to spend time with them, and it was just like, after hearing how they eloquently are in their communities, doing the work, going to school, just progressing all the way down, and then also are doing our grant making process as well with NDR. My wife and I are like, our children are in good hands because these are the next level of young adults that are speaking, that are asking the question. And I say, keep asking those questions. Then we may not know, so we can find the solutions together. They have the answers. It's been in their system and how they got into this world. So us adults, we just get out of the way and we listen and we come up with good strategies together. So you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. So let's make something and manifest it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for, I think, holding space for our young people and ensuring that even though they weren't able to join us today, we still want them to be in this conversation and still be present in this space together. So I think now, just being mindful of time, we're going to transition to a time of wrap down. And we always try and end with a closing word of some kind. We give you that space for a closing word, but I'll also give you a prompt. If you'd like to answer it, sometimes that is helpful. But the final question would be taking that time and space for you and your organization, or things that you'd like to highlight and bring forward. What role do you see your organization playing in shaping the future of philanthropy for Indigenous communities? And it's a big one. How can existing philanthropy assist in achieving this future? And for this one, Heather, I'm coming straight to you.
Yay, I don't mind this one.
Good.
All right.
Okay.
I think this is a pretty good question for me to give a shout out to the Indigenous Economic Wellbeing Alliance. It's a group of Native-led nonprofits in the Southwest. We're all entrepreneurship support organizations. It's Change Labs, Native Community Capital, and New Mexico Community Capital. And we came together to form the alliance to share resources because we were just kind of sick of philanthropy's, I guess, need to make us compete for funding when really we all are doing great work. We collaborate. We even share a lot of the same community members that we work with, and we like to think that we all work together to move people through our programs and support and uplift. And I feel like we've had a lot of donors resistant to the idea of saying, like, instead of funding just one of us, fund all of us, and then let us use the resources as we see fit. But I feel like we are more comfortable with that, and it significantly eases the burden on all of us, and it makes us less competitive, because it does feel bad when, I mean, you want to celebrate when your brother or sister gets a big grant, but it's also that zero-sum mindset kind of creeps in, like, well, now there's less for me, and you get jealous. I mean, it's human nature. And I hate that philanthropy drives that right now. That's not a good thing. So I feel like creating alliances and coalitions is more in line with how we think and how we want to work. So the thing that I am trying to do, that Change Labs and these other organizations are trying to do, is ask philanthropy to think about supporting us in a different way, not as individuals, but as teams, as groups, and that we are active participants in that. The other thing I wanted to say just before we all sign off is that if I had a grant for every time a budding nonprofit asked Change Labs to be a fiscal sponsor, we would have that $100 million right now. We need more Native fiscal sponsors in Native communities. I don't know how to fix that or how to address that, but when we're talking about the supporting more Native nonprofits and helping them get started, we need those fiscal sponsors that are in close proximity to the community. And the fiscal sponsorship comes with so many benefits other than just receiving money. But a lot of the businesses and nonprofits we work with, like creating that bookkeeping and accounting system, building all that infrastructure is hard. So having a fiscal sponsor who can kind of shepherd you through that and also like strengthen your financials and help you get off the ground is super critical. And then the other thing I would ask for is just like more flexibility around capital campaigns. So many donors do not want to fund capital campaigns. And I'm like, dude, do you understand? We don't have infrastructure on the reservation. We don't have buildings. If you really want to support this work, you need to support capital campaigns on the reservation, because like Change Labs, we had to build our building in order to exist as a brand new organization. We had to like get all the electrical and all of that set up. We had to find our own internet source. Like that's what like a year-old nonprofit will have to do that on the reservation in order to grow. So get over the whole like we don't do capital campaigns, especially if you're going to work in Native communities.
You tell them, Heather. I appreciate that.
Thank you
Josh.
so much for that, Heather. You and I want to have a conversation with you after this, honestly, about so much of this, because I feel like we're on the same page with a lot of this stuff. And philanthropy, the thing that folks don't realize, I think, is that private philanthropy, they have a lot of flexibility with how they can fund. Like they actually could fund capital campaigns. Like maybe they have a policy or something, but they can change it. It's not like working with government, which you have to go through like a bunch more hoops, which is, that's a whole thing in and of itself. But that's where there's a lot of opportunity, I think, in philanthropy, if we can get folks to just be more flexible and understand how they can better support us.
Absolutely. Shash, I'll come to you next for this closing remarks or the two-part mega question of what's the role that you see yourself in your organization playing, and how can philanthropy assist in achieving this future?
I think we're definitely doing it. We're a model of what Native philanthropy is, and we welcome other philanthropists to sit with us and to be able to have these understandings of the importance of having these grant making process integrate and involve community members to do the decision making. So we are definitely continuing to do that this year. We will be giving again 3.5 million out, and we're in the midst of the process of grant making process. So it's my high season time right now. And it's exciting because this year we received 243 applications and we sifted through it. And so we're reviewing 161 applications right now. And so it's tremendous, and we need more funds to be able to manifest and make this happen. And also, Charley mentioned the report. We have the Native Voices Rising report, the 10-year impact report. Dr. Aviso has worked on and put together. There's recommendations in there. And I think that the next levels of that would be for us to come together to figure out what we need to do to make those recommendations happen. So that you have access to that at our website as well to download that report. And then again, I just want to highlight the NVR Funders Learning Fellowship that has started, and we're looking again to make that happen this year. And again, Dr. Arvizo is the one that would be really important to pull in on those conversations. And I do feel like those are different pieces of what we're doing and that we're going to continue to do, to build and strategize and work together and and build this collaborative approach with each other as how we build in the philanthropy world. But I just want to say thank you again. I send blessings to everybody. And manifesting is very powerful. When you manifest, it's right there for you. Creator has that ability to manifest that with you and make it happen. And that's who we are as a people, right? We create. If somebody needs something, we make sure that they get it. If somebody is out of something, we make sure that they have it. And that's how it is and has been in societies that within our communities, and we are coming back to that. We are coming back to that. So I just appreciate every one of you and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for making space for that one. All right, Carly, I'm going to extend to you the final word, closing out the panel before we get to all the boring admin closing announcements. What do you have? What's the role and how can philanthropy achieve it?
I mean, I don't have one word. I want to say, like, reach out to us, find out about what we're doing. We've got a lot of cool campaigns. We had a lot of cool things that were happening, and find out how you can participate. But the main thing, honestly, that I want to share is that my COVID kid is sitting here listening to this whole conversation under the table. And I started out this conversation talking about how I grew up in the world of nonprofits, basically like sitting under a table and listening to my parents work. And so my kid is doing that right now. He's listening to us right now. And so I just want to put that out there and remind folks that they're paying attention and that they've got the answers, man. And so I'm just super proud. So that's what I want to end with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to just say thank you to all three of you for not only your time and expertise, but the context, I think, behind what brought forth this conversation and what fuels kind of the work that we see being done. It's heavy. And I think you all on that front line and actually doing it carry such a burden for our communities and for our peoples. And Shash, I know you said this is your busy time, and I think that could be said for the others as well, but you made, I think, this time not only for this presentation, but the pre-work that went into this and now going over time. And I just want to extend a true iguian to each of you for your example and for all that you're doing. So thank you for everything today.
Thank you, Bobby.
Of course. Well, that is all that I have, everybody. It was a phenomenal panel, and we really do appreciate all of your participation. I don't know if we've had an active group chat that we have had today, so thank you for your expertise, for working with one another, for being in community, even behind a screen. That is the point. One of the points of these MESs is we want to see that collaboration and that work across Indian country and with our ally relatives beyond that. So thank you for being here today. Before I hand the mic back over to Candace, I also want to extend another thank you. There is a team that carries the work that we do with these MESs. And there is one person in particular who is going on a new journey. Katie Gorham, our production director for Tetelco, is in charge of the behind the scenes, making sure that we all look good, that our cameras aren't fuzzy, that you can hear us, that our lighting's okay. And Katie is moving on to a new journey. So we're very excited for Katie and very excited to see who is taking their place. But we just want to extend a NAP thank you to Katie for being an ally, I think, in this work, for being a voice and just elevating the work that's being done in the conversations that are necessary for Indian country. We thank you for that and are so excited to see how we can work together in the next phase. So, I will now bring Kansas back on screen for our quick closing announcements. But thank you all so much again. And Kansas, I pass it back to you.
Thank you, Bobby Trey, and to all of our panelists, Carly, Shash, and Heather, especially for all of you who joined us today live and had a lot of really great conversations in the chat. I think we all had some really great information that was given to us, and I really appreciate all of you and your time for that. We appreciate your continued support in the ongoing program, and particularly your support for the member education sessions. We hopefully that you've taken away a lot of really great information, and especially for all of the nonprofit organizations, Native-led, that are operating right now and who are, leading the way for the future. I feel like a lot of times those nonprofit organizations came from somebody's dream, somebody's will to take care of their community and to help them in a specific way, and maybe have struggled along the way, as many have talked about, in creating capacity and fulfilling those needs of our people, and creating those pathways and bridging those gaps. And I feel like those are the areas of where they chose to change something on their own rather than wait for something. So hopefully all of these speakers that you guys heard from today and their organizations, you can definitely find more information about them on their sites. As a reminder, the session was open to the public. As a highlight to our member benefits, NAP membership is open to Indigenous relatives and non-Indigenous allies. Even if you're not a NAP member yet, we want you to learn more. Please visit our newly redesigned website at nativephilanthropy.org or email Reina Davila Day at ourday@nativephilanthropy.org. Lastly, you should be receiving an email with a link to a short survey. Please take a few moments to share your opinions and what you'd like the session series to look like. It should take about 5 to 6 minutes to complete, so please provide your invaluable feedback for our team and the planning sessions. It's not, or at least it shouldn't be, shocking to know we're on the countdown to the election. With only 75 days left, NAP is shifting our focus to the civic engagement. Democracy is Indigenous, and Indian country needs time and space to explore that. We'll be doing that in our next MES. We'll look forward to joining us in September for a conversation on voting and civil rights on National Voter Registration Day on September 17th. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. You all have a great afternoon. Ahiyahet.